Okay, so welcome back. It is Monday, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. I am just trying to figure out still how I'm going to be doing this. Today is the first day that we've been able to open the church up to Mass for the public in over a month and a half. We had 4 people here this morning, so that was good. Good to be able to see my parishioners again. I just asked for prayers this week as we get ready to uh, continue to prepare for the weekend, which is going to be really, really crazy because with trying to maintain social distancing, not sure how that's really going to happen. But so yesterday I did a video on I think it was yesterday. It was either yesterday or Saturday. It's kind of hard to keep track right now of the days of the week, even though Kitty's going to want to play. So even though and that would be my cat knocking something over if you heard that noise. Um, so yeah, the other day I did a video on the death of Paul VI, who was the Pope from 1963 to 1978. Paul VI would be the first Pope to visit America as Pope. He'd be the first Pope to address the United Nations. Although since then, John Paul II, uh, Benedict XVI and Francis have all addressed the United Nations since then. But today I just wanted to look real briefly at the death of John Paul I. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Godfather, you know that they play a little, they kind of allude to it as the one that Don Corleone goes to confession to. And they would say that he was assassinated because he was going to try to reform the Vatican Bank. But as we know, that's a bunch of hooey. So John Paul I was the first, one of the shortest papacies. He was only Pope for 34 days. And he was actually an interesting one. I found an article right before I went live with this. Let's see if I could bring it up. So I'm still learning how to do all of these little different things. Let's see. Hold on. Okay, why is that not coming up? Let's try this again. So I hope this is finding everybody okay. Like I said, it's good that we are able to do the church again. Okay, why is that not showing up? I did have a good time streaming last night. There we go. Okay, so let me make sure. So one of the things I looked up when John Paul I was elected Pope, he was the first Pope in over 1,000 years to choose a unique name. And I actually had to look up this Pope. I had never heard of him before. Landone, 913. Basically, if you look that up on Wikipedia, it would be Pope Lando. So for those Star Wars fans, and this being the 4th of May the 4th be with you. I'm not going to make any jokes on that. But John Paul I was the first to pick a unique name in almost 1,000 years. And part of the reason he chose John Paul was to honor both John the 23rd and Paul VI. And they were the ones, as you know, who started the first Vatican or the Second Vatican Council. And the idea was that he was going to continue to implement the reforms from Vatican II. Albino Luciani. Not many Italian names I could say, but I've heard of Luciani a number of times. Yeah, so let's see, it says the lack of an R in his name is noted by those who say that since Pius IX in 1846, cat's going nuts on my keyboard over here. I might be able to hear her. Cardinal selected popes have altered between being thin without an R and rotund with an R in their name. That is interesting. I had never noticed that before. I did not know that. His selection also means that the Italians have continued their 4th century domination of the papacy, basically referring to Adrian VI, a Dutchman who reigned for 1 year in 1522 to 1523. And John Paul II would be the first non-Italian to break that streak, and there hasn't been an Italian pope since. But it says as the Cardinals became more international with each consistory. So basically, when the Pope has declaring to be Cardinals to be, uh, speculation grew that Pope Paul VI's successor would be a non-Italian, considering the universal nature of the Roman Catholic Church. These names, some of the names listed here, I have never heard, with the exception of John Villette of France. But I don't know if I can bring it up. I tried to stream last week with Father Sinatra, and when I did that, I got into a little trouble with the BBC because they copyrighted part of my video, which I showed part of Doctor Who, and they wouldn't let me continue it. But if you look on YouTube, go to ABC Papal Conclave for John Paul II, and it's really fun to watch when Peter Jennings is trying to pronounce Carol Wojtyła, and honestly, it took about 20 years to be able to pronounce that for me. In the parish in Philly for my diaconate year with a Polish priest, and it took about half a semester to be able to learn how to pronounce Marcheski correctly. Too many syllables for me. But anyway, I just wanted to show a few articles from the election of John Paul I and the death of John Paul I. Let's see if I can bring these up. So, okay, let's get rid of that one screen. Okay. You can see the cat's tail in the background. Okay, so this is from the Des Moines Register, which is the newspaper from back home where I grew up. It's the main paper of Iowa, one of the main papers. But on August 26, 1978, the Cardinals chose Albino Luciani as the Pope. Again, it says it's referring to the two previous predecessors, John the 23rd and Paul VI. But this was chosen on the fourth ballot at 12:30 Central Time in Iowa time, where he gave the Urbi et Orbi address to the city of Rome and to the world, which is what Pope Francis did not too long ago on a Friday during this pandemic. Again, with everything that's going on, it's kind of hard to keep track of the dates and what's happening when. But John Paul II smiled broadly, and really that's something you didn't see a whole lot back then. Anyway, Cat's walking on the thing, and Cat forwarded the thing. Anyway, the Cardinal Wright, who was the Bishop of Detroit, if I remember correctly, highest ranking American cardinal, called the new pope witty and urbane, stroke of good fortune for the intellectual life, for the simplicity of the soul. And he was the Bishop of Venice, I believe. Yeah, Venice. 65 years old at the time, considered to be a moderate. And so President Carter was the president at the time, extended his congratulations. The son of a socialist worker. But at the same time, his mother was a Christian. So anyway, that was the election of John Paul I from the Des Moines Register. Let's see if we can find the other one that I was looking up. From the Indiana Star. So if you were watching the channel last night, you would have seen that we were going through some of the newspapers with Father Sinatra looking at dates in history, and this was kind of one of the things that I was looking at. Let's see, that's not the one I want. There we go. Okay, so this is from the Indianapolis Star. Again, Sunday, August 27th, 1978. And John Paul was known as the Smiling Pope. The other thing that's interesting to note is he chose the name John Paul I. You know, usually when there's a new pope that's the first of a name, they don't call him like Pope Francis. They didn't choose Francis I. But Luciani took the name John Paul I. So Says crowd of 200,000 in St. Peter's greeted the announcement, and it took 45 minutes. So in my lifetime, I remember watching two papal elections: the election of Benedict the 16th and Francis. The only thing was when Benedict was elected, I didn't get to watch the election live. When Benedict was elected, I was at my parish, my theology assignment, my apostolate for the year, which was in North Philly, and we had the funeral for a priest of the parish who had just died, a retired priest that was in residence, Father Fox, God rest his soul. So I got permission to go to the funeral because I really enjoyed knowing this priest. And this was during the conclave, the first day of the conclave, and I thought there's no way they're going to elect a new pope right after, the whole thing begins. Well, after the funeral mass was over, we're coming out, the pastor's running, shouting Habemus Papam. In other words, we have a pope. So we all rushed to the nearest TV, and that's when they said Ratzinger was elected. Myself, I was excited, but I think some of the priests that were watching with me from Philadelphia were not too thrilled. So Luciani, again, would be pope for only 34 days. So not really too... Oh, this is interesting. It says that he was an opponent of Pope Paul's controversial 1968 Decree Humanae Vitae, declaring no artificial methods of birth control were permissible. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. And honestly, I believe Paul VI was a prophet on this. So, but as I said, again, nobody expected the Pope to die after just 34 days of being a Pope. It would be like if Francis was to die within a month after having been elected. And those poor cardinals would have had to go to Rome for not only the funeral of Paul VI, but the conclave of John Paul I, and then they went home, only to turn around to come back for the funeral of John Paul I and the election of John Paul II. So those cardinals earned their frequent flyer miles at that time. But so 34 days later, John Paul I died in his sleep. He wasn't murdered. Let's see, I got that article. There we go. So again, coming from the Des Moines Register from back home. Let's see, we're going to bring this up. Let's see. Okay, so John Paul I is dead. Pontiff dies of a heart attack in his sleep. Make sure that's showing up. Okay, good. It is. So brief reign lasts just a month. He was the 263rd Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. And, when I was in Rome 2 years ago, I actually got to see his tomb. But he was declared dead at 11 o'clock Thursday evening, which would have been 5 o'clock Central Time, but his death wasn't discovered until the next day, so about 5:30 in the morning or 11:30 in the evening for Iowa. But during the brief reign, the pontiff had already transformed the normal sedate papal audiences into informal gatherings, peppered with personal anecdotes and broken up with laughter from guests. I've never seen what a Paul VI audience would have been like, so I can only imagine. But let me see, I'm just going to hit refresh on something. See how that's coming along. So, yeah, so as you notice in the thing is, so by contrast, his predecessor, Paul VI, was noted for his formal and intellectual approach to his general audiences, resorting to humor very rarely. So, Bishop Dingman was the Bishop of Des Moines at the time, was surprised by the news, and honestly, I don't blame him. I remember hearing Bishop Ruskowitz talk about how Cardinal Regali, they were friends in Rome at the time, was surprised, came up to his door and said that the Pope was dead. It's like, yeah, he died a month ago. No, the new Pope had died. So, but yeah, so Luciani never held any Vatican post before his election. So, like Paul VI, Cardinal Montini, he was the Secretary of State under Pope Pius XII. I don't know what John the 23rd was. I think he was the Patriarch of Venice as well. But he was known for a smile and putting people at ease. So, again, it would have been a big surprise. Let's see if I can find the next one. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. Oh, it does. Okay, well, that helps. I don't have to keep flipping between pages. That's good. But yeah, Cardinals would seek a pope like Pope John Paul, Italian with no links to Central Church administration. Let's see. If the cardinal electors wanted a pastoral pope from Italy only 5 weeks ago, there would be no reason for them to change in such a short time. So, but the thing is that's interesting, everybody that thinks they're going to go in as a pope comes out a cardinal. So usually the prediction of who the new pope would be usually turns out not to be. So he would have been 66, but anyway. So yeah, so I think for the next video I'm going to do something on John Paul II, who was the Pope for the majority of my lifetime. Second or third longest reigning Pope, I can't remember. I know I said that the other day. When you think of 1978 and the three popes and the end of the 18th, 19th century where you had three popes within the span of 60-some years. So we're now into the 7th year of Pope Francis. So anyway, El Papa Morto, the Pope is dead. One of the movies I would say, if you've never seen it, it's a good movie to watch, The Shoes of the Fisherman from the 1960s. It has, oh dear, I'm blanking on the name, but it really has one of the best scenes that I've seen for the election of a pope. Oh, let me look that up real quick. Anthony Quinn is the one that plays the pope. So let's see if we can bring up the cover at least. Oh, come on. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to close that and share this. So, Shoes of the Fisherman, starring Anthony Quinn, Oscar Werner, who was in Fahrenheit 451, good movie, David Janssen from The Fugitive. I don't know who Victoria de Sica was, but Leo McKern, who is also a great English actor. He was in Man for All Seasons. One of my favorite sci-fi movies is The Day the Earth Caught Fire. And that movie was made in 1963. Basically, a story of what would have happened if the Soviets and the Americans set off a nuke at the same time at opposite poles, knocks the Earth out of orbit, heading towards the sun. Sir John Gilead, great actor. He was in, oh darn, what is the name? Winds of War. That 1980s miniseries from ABC. I remember watching that as a kid, and I bought it not too long ago. So anyway, that's about all I'm going to do for today. Hopefully this will be seen a little bit more. Anyway, so with that, I'm going to say adios. I'm going to go pray my office now and hopefully do another live stream tomorrow afternoon. And we'll be live streaming the Mass again tomorrow morning at 7. And then I'm hoping to do another thing with maybe Father Sinatra later this week on Wednesday. We'll still plan on doing the priest council on Sunday that's coming up. Hopefully we'll get some more priests to join us for that one. So until then, take care and God bless.